the Kingdom of the Danes is a very special faction. Main reason being they don't have any cavalry. The Danes, modern day Danes, live in this area over here. I live a bit further up here in Norway. At one point we were in a union, but that didn't work out, so we're not in a union anymore, and we can't understand Danish worth shit. So, the Danes have two generals options. The Warlord's Companions, a very sturdy, high charge, insanely expensive sword unit, and the Housecarls. Now both of these have a lot of armor, but the Housecarls don't have a missile block chance. They will, however, murder anything and everything on the charge. 95 charge bonus, that approaches shock cavalry territory. And with 50 melee damage, they will one-shot a lot of infantry units on the charge. But they are vulnerable. They are vulnerable to cavalry, they are vulnerable to anything that can fire on them. In terms of spears, we have Levy Freeman and Spearman, and the difference between these two units isn't that great. The Levy Freeman are of course the best unit in the game. 6 armor, 36 morale. They don't have any precursors, but they do interestingly have the rapid advance ability, increasing speed by 50% for a whole 30 seconds. So that's not too shabby when you need to be chasing down some skirmishers. Melee infantry, a very sturdy sword herdman, and of course the Berserkers. The sword herdmen, as other sword infantry, they excel in shield wall, and the Berserkers excel at just straight up killing infantry on the charge. They won't do too well in extended melee because they have a very high melee attack, but they only have 40 melee damage and 4 armor piercing. So these guys need to get the charge, 80 charge bonus. That's going to hurt. The Danes have a nice selection, the best selection in fact of axe infantry in the game. It starts out with very cheap axe freemen. Then you get axemen, a bit more armor, slightly better stats. The big axes, again a unit that will kill any and all opposing infantry, but they are very vulnerable to cavalry and very vulnerable to getting shot on. You have the axe herdmen, a unit that does a great job defensively, a great job offensively, just overall a great unit. A nice selection of bows as well, perhaps surprisingly. Starts out with the crappy archers, the Viking hunters with 38 missile damage, and the armored archers with a whole 46 armor, which is a very nice armor value for an archer unit. And then you have the skirmishers. So lacking cavalry, but they do have an especially nice selection of axes. So what might the Dane army look like? Well, if we're going to have max 4 of the same unit type, I'm going to be bringing 4 Levy Freeman most of the time. I'm going to be bringing 4 axe herdmen most of the time. I'm going to be bringing 4 big axes most of the time. I'm going to be bringing some armored archers most of the time. And then you have some funds left for Berserkers. The fair effect can be very nice. There are a few low morale units in the Age of Charlemagne. And then you have some funds left to spend on whatever. It could be nice to have some skirmishers in the mix for close range anti-cav support. It could be nice to have an additional archer unit, but it can be hard to protect those units when you're fighting up against enemies with more cavalry than you, and to be fair, that's going to be most enemies. So you could also, I mean, an infantry max, if there's something like max 8 melee infantry or max 10 infantry total, the Danes are just royally fucked. The Danes do not work under those rules. They kind of become like the nomads in Rome 2 in that regard. In my opinion, infantry maxes shouldn't apply to the Danes. This is a nice Dane army, I think. And you could, of course, do a lot of other things with the Danes. Bringing a housecarl general instead of the warlord's companions, but this guy just runs around with a big sign going "Please shoot me to bits" on him, so that's going to be a tough time. And for the final unit here, you could bring an additional axe unit, no problem. And if you kill the enemy cav, and if you manage to chase down the skirmishers, the Danes will win, because there are no factions able to stand up to the Dane infantry on the charge. Units that get hit by big axes are going to die in seconds. The same is true for units hit by berserkers. But deal with the skirmishers and deal with the cavalry when you're fighting as the Danes, and you're going to have a good time. If not, you're going to have a horrible time. Strength and honor.